Today we're joined with Cat Ekkelboom-White out of Innsbruck, Austria. She's an incredible elopement and adventure photographer as well as a business coach. But one of her big new primary projects is Photographers for People and Planet, which is discussing your legacy as a photographer and how that connects with sustainability and ethics within your business. So I'm going to give it away to Cat here, and she's going to be in charge from now on. Thanks, Cat.
Ooh, in charge. Exciting. Awesome. Thank you to everybody that's come along to this. Yeah, I know that this isn't maybe the most kind of glamorous topic that there is in the world of photography and photography education, but certainly for me, it's something very close to my heart and something I think is super important to consider. So I'm really, really happy that you're here. Thanks, Carl, for the intro. I'm just going to give myself a quick intro as well, although I think you've probably covered most of it. So who am I? My name is Cat Ekkelboom-White. I am originally from the UK, but I live in the Austrian Alps. Been here, I think I worked out almost 15 years now. I'm a Fujifilm ambassador, and I specialize in elopements and adventurous weddings here in the mountains that I call my home. So my photography business is Wild Connections Photography, so it's not under my name. And as Carl mentioned, something that I started, I think my brain is frazzled on timelines, but I think earlier this year was a sustainability initiative called Photographers for People and Planet, because I wanted to bring some of these conversations that I saw happening in other industries into our industry to look at the impacts that we can be having as photographers. So I want to dive in and just ask everybody a question. And obviously I can't see the chat, but just kind of, you can answer this and we can talk about it later. I want to just know if you've ever been influenced by an image. And so where this can happen a lot, for example, is if you have ever scrolled Instagram and seen an image from another photographer and just thought, holy shit, wow, that's amazing. Like, I want to go there, or I want to shoot a wedding like that. Because I have, certainly many, many times. And now just imagine a bit of time has passed, you put some effort into trying to get to this location or to get that kind of clients, and you go, you shoot this wedding. And then you get back home and you're so excited to share these images because they're absolutely freaking incredible. And you're ready to inspire the next group of people to travel to that location. So not just more clients, more couples, but also potentially more photographers. So as photographers, I think a lot of us do connect with the term legacy. I think it's built into the core of the work that we do, especially anyone, if you work in the world of weddings, family photography, anything where you're capturing milestones, like important life moments for people, even portraiture, I think, as well. So a big part of our legacy is capturing these important memories, these milestones, photos for people of their loved ones, these moments of joy and happiness that we can then give to our clients as a gift of essentially their memories and the memories of the people that they love in the form of photos and videos. And they're able to return to these incredible memories time and time again. And that's an incredible legacy to leave as a photographer. But that's not the only way that our work has a legacy in the world. And so I hate this term, and whether you like this term or not, I think we all need to accept that we are all influencers. We all have a scope of influence, and that it's really important, especially as the digital world is just growing and growing, that we need to reflect on just quite how far our impact and our legacy can reach, and also maybe sit with the acknowledgement that not everything we do leaves a positive legacy. So we want to make sure that we aren't starting out with images like this one from a destination wedding in the Faroe Islands, and we're leaving this legacy for whoever comes next. So today I want to take you through how your legacy as a photographer has a wide reach across everything that you do. And we'll look a little bit at the impact of our images. But before we go into that, I want to just take a kind of a step back, because everybody comes to sustainability from kind of a different background, a different amount of knowledge. So I want to just look at what being sustainable means to us as photographers, but just in the general kind of sense of things as well, and then relate it back to the work that we do and the legacy that we leave as photographers. So just to go right back to basics, what is sustainability? And sustainability has become this buzzword to the point where it means pretty much everything now, and it also means nothing. Like, some people hear the term sustainability and they just kind of sigh and shut off. But sustainability can mean so many different things. For some people, it means longevity in business. For others, it might mean being environmentally conscious, or it might mean being ethical. And when it comes to us as individuals and as business owners, I believe that sustainability is about making choices that help protect the planet. They help enrich the lives of all of the people around the world, in the communities where we live in and further afield. And they also provide us with a consistent income stream that allows us to sustain our lifestyles. So when it comes to defining sustainability, there's so many definitions out there. And I wanted to share one because this is kind of the basis of a lot of the work that I do around sustainability is based around this definition of what it means to be sustainable for sustainability. And this is a definition that was used during my training with the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. And the reason I love this definition is because it isn't just about working to a goal that's one day in the future. It's about creating an impact already, like now. And so the definition that I love when it comes to sustainability is the long-term well-being for all people and the planet. So when we're looking at the fact that it's not just the planet, it's also people, that means that sustainability is a broad and complex topic that covers so many different areas. And so I want to just go over what kind of those areas are and relate them back to the work that we do as photographers. So sustainability, the different kind of core areas of this can be divided into three essentially main pillars of sustainability. And I learned about this concept when I was actually training as a hiking guide. They related a lot of the work that we were doing. So hiking guiding is very much in the outdoor industry and also heavily linked with tourism. And a lot of the conversations that we were having around sustainability, I realized had so much kind of relevance also to the world of photography, especially with weddings and also destination weddings in particular. So when we look at the different kind of main areas of sustainability, or the three pillars, we have the environment, we have the economy, and we have society. And these are kind of the three main pillars based upon the UN Sustainable Development Goals from 2015. And there is a resources sheet that you will get to go with this that goes into that in a bit more detail if you're interested in learning about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because it is quite an interesting read. But these pillars of sustainability, they're known by many different things. So perhaps you've heard of the terms planet, people, profit, or the 3 Ps, which can also be known as the triple bottom line. And essentially what that is in terms of how it relates to a business, this triple bottom line is, firstly, how environmentally responsible are you? The second is, how socially responsible are you? And the final one with profit is how financially sustainable your business is. And so those all are the different kind of areas that can influence then how we choose to go forward in our businesses, to look at our impact until now and to look at our legacy going forward, and to work out potentially areas where we can improve and change things. So I want to just go into these 3 different pillars separately and to kind of break them down into the main components and how they relate to the work that we do. So if we start with environmental sustainability, because this is the kind of aspect of sustainability that most people kind of think of first when it comes to talking about sustainability. And within environmental sustainability, you have kind of 3 main areas, 3 main subcategories where we all have an impact. And so let's start with the biggest one, the first one, and that is emissions. So when it comes to emissions, or as you might have heard the term, who hasn't heard the term by now, carbon footprint, one of the most significant things in your business is going to be your carbon footprint, because this includes all of the activities that your business does. And carbon footprints are actually divided into 3 main categories. So we have our scope 1 emissions, which is like our direct emissions from fossil fuels that we are burning to do our business. And so actually this is usually one of the smallest parts of our business emissions. These come from if you drive a car, and if you, for example, heat your home or your office, wherever you work from, if that is also heated by fossil fuels such as oil or gas. So we have our scope 1. They're pretty easy to measure. Then we have our scope 2, which is also relatively easy to measure. Scope 2 is the energy that you're buying in. So that is essentially your electricity supply, which can be relatively large for us doing, considering the amount of time that we spend on computers, charging batteries and things, but it's still not the largest part of our emissions. So the largest part of our emissions in the work that we do as photographers comes under scope 3, which is also, unfortunately, the most difficult to measure. But there are ways that you can try to get a better idea of that. And so scope 3 is literally everything else. So it's the manufacturing, shipping, usage of your equipment. It's any travel that you might do, anything like printed products, and also their shipping. But a couple of other really huge parts of our scope 3 emissions are any outsourcing that we do. So that counts as our own business emissions, and also our digital footprints, which are growing year by year. So I thought it might be interesting just to see if anyone had any idea, because there are certain industries that are definitely pictured as being more harmful than others. So I wanted to know if anybody could tell me which industry has higher emissions, if it is the tech industry or the aviation industry. And so this is where technology may or may not fail me. If you scan the QR code, it's going to take you to a multiple choice questionnaire, and I want you to vote for what you think, which industry you think is responsible for the most emissions. Do you think it's tech? Do you think it's aviation? Or do you think maybe they're about the same? So I'll give you just like 30 seconds or something to click on that and just to cast your vote. I'm really interested to know what people think. Okay. All right, so now we've got the votes coming in. Okay. Give you another 10 more seconds for anyone else who wants to cast their vote. So at the moment, we have 20% say it's aviation, 60% say it's the tech industry, and 20% are saying it's maybe about the same. Okay, so the answer is, drum roll please. So actually, the answer is from a study in 2021, so already out of date. that in 2021, they were about the same. The tech industry and aviation accounted for around 2 to 3% of global emissions. However, maybe the slightly more worrying statistic from that, so those of you that said the tech industry, it is going to overtake aviation, because whilst the demand for flights maybe is growing, it's not growing to the degree that technology is growing. And so in 2022, there was a study done that said electricity consumption from things like data centers, from AI and cryptocurrency could double its 2022 levels by 2026. So that's a pretty short time frame. So it's just something to consider when we think about how it's great to go from everything being analog to going paperless to doing everything digitized, that actually that does also come with a price. So that is essentially carbon footprints. And in the resources, you have a tool, which I'll touch again later, on how you can calculate yours as a photographer with a bit more accuracy than a lot of the other calculators out there. So the next area where we might have an environmental impact as a business is waste generation. So again, I think as photographers, sometimes it's easy to think, well, actually, I don't have like a product-based business, like, so there shouldn't really be too much waste and pollution as a result of the work that I do. And yes and no. So photography is definitely not a particularly waste-heavy industry, but it doesn't mean that we are zero waste by any means. So just some examples of where waste might be generated in your business directly. You have just your day-to-day office waste. It's not a significant amount, but it's just worth kind of looking around and just looking at what your day-to-day office life is like and how much waste is generated. A big part that we are potentially contributing to is electronic waste. Electronic waste is a growing problem. And again, in the resources, I've linked a couple of articles around this because we could be here for days if we go into all of these in a lot of detail. But electronic waste, especially when it comes to all the electronics that we use, end of life, and how they are disposed of, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of issues around that. So it's something just to be aware of, how often are we buying new gear? How often are we replacing things like memory cards, batteries? And what do we do with these items when they do come to the end of their lives? Then, depending on your business model, you might still have things like printed products. And whether you're printing in-house or, for most of us, probably printing externally, just being aware of the fact that printed products also come sometimes with additional waste and pollution, depending on the process. Just popped into my mind as well, film photography, because that's having a bit of a renaissance again at the moment. So thinking about the chemicals that are used in printing, in developing, and the potential waste from shipping and things like that. And also things like client gifts. What things are you gifting your clients? How are you giving them to them? And are you potentially creating additional waste there? It might not seem like a huge amount of stuff, but there are just areas to be aware of. But a big part of our impact when it comes to waste and pollution as photographers is actually an indirect influence that we have. And that is through the images that we share and what is being promoted within those images. So every time we share an image of something, we are potentially influencing how many people might want that thing. It's something called mimetic desire. Essentially, when we see something that other people have, especially if they're gaining recognition, if they're even just gaining a lot of likes on social media, we see it as a status gain, and we want these things that other people have. So if we think about elaborate wedding details, things like that, these can all indirectly influence people's purchasing. So this might be through wedding favors. It could be through personalized wedding details that are used for the day and never used again. It can be things like confetti, smoke bombs, and champagne sprays. And again, you might think, okay, well, the odd champagne spray or confetti, like, it's not a huge thing. But if we think about how many of these things take place every year, it's the waste and pollution is not zero. So just being aware of, when we're sharing these images, what am I promoting people to continue to do? What behaviors am I promoting? And it can also be, if you, depending on the types of work that you do as a photographer, even things like kind of the promoting of wearing different outfits for photo shoots and encouraging people to overconsume and to buy multiple outfits for shoots that potentially they aren't going to wear again. So that's just kind of an idea of how we can be responsible directly and indirectly for generating waste. And I want to show you something that popped up in my Instagram feed last week, because it really made me smile when people think like, oh yeah, wedding favors, things like that. No, it's not really waste. It's things that people can use again, because that, that's a trend. We give people things that they can reuse again. And this popped up in my feed, and this is, a personalized gift to a groomsman. Yeah, a nice hip flask. Great. It looks like, I think that's about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after the wedding, it ended up in a thrift store. And let's face it, maybe no one else is going to buy a personalized hip flask from somebody else's wedding. So that may end up down the line, hopefully being recycled, but it could end up in the trash. So it's just that awareness of what are we promoting when we're sharing images of things, especially when we share images of things like wedding details, what people might do as a result of that. I can't see the chat, but feel free to kind of drop it in the chat, or just kind of make a mental note of potentially any other wasteful or damaging behaviors that you could maybe unintentionally promote when you're sharing images as a photographer. And so I'm going to share you just a screen. It's just got a few random images on it of just some examples where we can be unintentionally promoting wasteful, damaging, polluting behaviors without really thinking about it. And the images I'm going to share, I want to caveat and say these are Canva stock images. I haven't singled out, hopefully, any photographers to say, this is wrong. And I also haven't done it for any of my own clients, because I don't want them to feel also singled out or bad about these things. So yeah, these are some Canva stock images of potentially harmful behaviors that we could be promoting when we're sharing images. So we have things like the trash the dress shots, where it's like, well, you're trashing outfits. Can they actually be cleaned? Can they be worn again? What is the kind of mess that you're leaving behind? We have the wedding favors. We have the balloon and lantern releases, which are just throwing up trash and fire hazards into the atmosphere and letting them drop wherever. We have things like cake smashes, of just kind of being aware, are we glorifying food waste? There was something I saw earlier this week that was criticizing the TikTok trend of essentially wasting food for just amusing videos, and just kind of taking that kind of little bit of reflection of going, actually, is that something that also I'm maybe glorifying in the work that I do? We have smoke bombs. They are generally full of fairly not particularly nice chemicals. Champagne sprays, is it wasteful? And then we have things like the getting ready images where everyone has, so I've got the I think this is like a hen party, a bachelorette at a pool party, and they've all got team bride like swimsuits on. And it's like little things like that. If we're sharing these images, which seem like at the time like really cute details, thinking about the future kind of those items. Are these people ever going to wear a team bride swimsuit again? Are they going to end up in landfill? And if we're sharing these images, are we encouraging more people to buy these cute little one-off things that they're going to wear once and then either keep in the back of a wardrobe or just throw out? So it's just kind of a little bit of awareness of what do the images that I'm sharing, what behaviors are they potentially promoting? And that kind of then moves on to the final part of our impact in terms of environmental sustainability, and that's the impact on the natural environment. And I feel like this is the area that's maybe talked about the most, especially in the world of elopements, adventure weddings, anyone who's shooting in the outdoor space. There have been, thankfully, a lot of conversations around leave no trace, which is great. It's a great place to start, but it's really important whenever we're thinking about our impact on the natural environment to just consider how, even when we're following leave no trace, how our actions can be impacting the natural environment. So just like with waste, the impact that we can have on the natural environment, it can be direct. So it can be the impact from us literally being in a place. But again, it can be indirect. It can be the kind of the repercussions, the follow-ons from when you're sharing a photo and others wanting to follow in those footsteps. And so just some of the ways that the natural environment can be impacted by our work, which can often lead to increased traffic to certain areas. That can lead to physical damage of sites. It can lead to the changes of behavior of wildlife, either from wildlife that becomes so used to humans that they start to depend on them for food, or wildlife that completely moves out of areas because there are simply too many people going there. And yes, as photographers, perhaps we might not be the biggest cause. I know there's a lot of finger pointing at social media travel influencers, but we are also influencers. We are influencers within our industries. So it's important just to recognize that we are not completely blameless in these situations. And also, as people tend to go more to certain areas, the need then to bring in additional infrastructure to create more maintained trails where they may have just originally been like a dirt track, additional parking, putting fences up, all of these things can result in locations becoming more popular, which is often promoted through photography. Okay, so that's the environment. That's kind of, there's a lot there. That's kind of probably the meatiest part of kind of that pillar of sustainability. I want to touch on the other two. These ones will be a little less in depth, but they are also super, super important. So economic sustainability. This is one that's maybe talked about a lot less. But the good news is making money in your business is vital to ensure long-term survival of a business. We all need to make money. And if you want a sustainable business, you need to keep making money. So in terms of business, this is great news. But how is economic sustainability linked with making money as a business? Essentially, to be an economically sustainable business, you need to be able to maintain growth and profitability over time, but without compromising future resources or opportunities. And when I say future resources and opportunities, not just for the next generation of photographers, but potentially also for yourself and your own business. Maybe this is a little bit more specific to, say, elopement photographers. But just thinking of if you are over-popularizing, say, a location and you are no longer able to work there for a particular reason, and you have to change, that can also impact your bottom line as a business. And so for us as photographers, promoting economic sustainability means essentially just running our businesses in a financially responsible way. So what does that mean, financially responsible? That sounds very adult and very boring. And yeah, you know what? It kind of is, but it's also super, super important. It means running a profitable business so that you can do things like paying taxes, which nobody likes to do. But we should celebrate paying taxes because paying taxes supports sustainable development. It supports the communities. It supports your local areas where you live. When you pay taxes, you're usually paying that into your own country, into your own region, depending on where you live. Taxes support things from access to healthcare and education. They support the legal systems. They support infrastructure. They support benefits and a healthy social system. So taxes while sometimes it can feel like the government is just taking money that they didn't earn, they are a really, really important part of of doing business, and of paying back for the work that you are able to do as a photographer. So taxes should be celebrated. Yes, they should be equal, and there is certainly work to do on political sides of how much taxes people pay, but they are really important. And the other thing that you can do to support economic sustainability is, when you're running a profitable business, that you're able to create jobs, you're able to outsource, you're able to either hire a team to work for you if that's what you want to do, if you want to expand your business, or even just working with freelancers and outsourcing the jobs that you don't particularly love to do so that you can make more money doing the things that you want to do. Those are really, really important ways to support economic sustainability within your own economy. And then the final area, which you will have talked about, you will have been engaged in conversations around this before, but maybe not within kind of this angle, and that's social and cultural sustainability. So social and cultural sustainability is really just about identifying and managing the impacts that you might have, both positive and negative, on all members of society. So your local community, but also across the whole planet, and looking at the reach and the impact that your work can have. So as a broader kind of sense, social and cultural sustainability includes things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are things that are talked about within our industry, not enough, but they are coming more and more into the mainstream. But that is a part of sustainability, being diverse, being inclusive as a business. So as photographers, can we look at our work and say, are we supporting and are we prioritizing diversity and inclusion in our work? And if not, how can we do that? Is our work respectful of other cultures and traditions? Or are we falling into tokenizing or stereotyping certain people, so certain cultures, certain traditions, in order to capture what we think are compelling images? So cultural respect and preserving traditions is very much a part of social and cultural sustainability. And when we think about other aspects such as access to education, healthcare, quality of living, looking at the work that you do and kind of asking yourself, how does my work, and especially if you shoot a lot of destination work, how does my work support or impact the quality of living of other people, especially in the destinations where I'm working? So those are kind of our three pillars of sustainability. And so let's kind of look a little bit more at, firstly, before we look at ways that we can start to embrace these and create more of a positive legacy in our business, I want to just kind of touch on why it matters. And I get it. Like, I kind of, whenever I bring up sustainability, a lot of people shut off instantly. And the reason is, I think there's a lot of guilt can come up around the term sustainability, the topic. And often there's this conflict because maybe being a sustainable business doesn't align with your personal or your professional goals for your business. Let's get real. For most wedding photographers, it's their dream to travel around the world and shoot these epic destinations. For a lot of photographers now, there's definitely a lot more discussion around shooting these high-end, these luxury weddings, which also maybe are not the most sustainable. So there can be these feelings of conflict there. But I think no matter how you feel about these topics personally, these topics around environmental sustainability, diversity, and inclusion, there is a business incentive to embrace this within your business, as well as just for having that feeling like you are doing something that is good for the future of all people and the planet. So in terms of a business reason why embracing sustainability is going to be important moving forward, so the younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, will soon have in the United States the most purchasing power out of any demographic. And so there is this demand, this increasing demand for businesses that are sustainable and businesses that prioritize inclusivity and transparency. So there is this growth in ethical consumerism, and more people are wanting to buy from ethical businesses. And within that, people are becoming less and less tolerant, especially Gen Z, on things like woke washing. So businesses that say they're sustainable, that say they're ethical, but their actions show something else. And let's face it, especially for the work that we do as photographers, often we're maybe just single people within our business, or we're small teams. And for us especially, reputation matters. And we see anytime that, it happens with big corporations, but we see even things within our own industry, if people get called out for making mistakes, sometimes that can really ruin a photographer's reputation. And then coming into that, we don't know how this is going to progress in the future, but for bigger companies now, there are these laws coming in about supply chain transparency, that companies now need to know who are their suppliers, who are the people that you work with, and are they also ethical and responsible? And at the moment, these laws are only for bigger businesses, but who knows whether these will filter down also to small businesses like photographers who are self-employed, and that we will also be expected to know who our suppliers are and their ethical credentials as well. And just if this wasn't a business incentive enough, the study from earlier this year from one of the big financial consulting companies, they did a survey. I think this was from the UK, maybe the US. And their results showed that consumers were willing to pay almost 10% more for a service or a product as a sustainability premium. So essentially they were willing to pay more from a brand that they deemed to be sustainable. So if you don't want to do it for the good of the planet and for the good of people on the planet, just thinking that there is also a business incentive to maybe start to think about sustainability and your impact within your business as it is now. Okay, so great. I've talked to you about different parts of sustainability. We've touched a little bit on how they maybe might show up in your business, but what can you do? How do these relate to being a photographer? So let's look at some of the steps that we can take within these different areas of sustainability to start to embrace sustainability more, so that we are having a more positive impact in the work that we're doing and we are creating a positive legacy. So let's talk about environmental sustainability first. So one of the biggest things that you can do is to measure your emissions. And this can be really, really eye-opening. And so in the resources that you will get from this talk, there is a spreadsheet that I have created with a data scientist, because I am terrible at spreadsheets and maths. And we have tried to find the best way for photographers to calculate your carbon footprint, your emissions, because so many of the tools out there are really unsuited to the work that we do. So I really, really encourage you to download a copy of that and create your own overview. Do it from last year. So do it for a full year, do it for the last year, and look at where your emissions are. And then set a reduction strategy. And then as part of your work of becoming a more sustainable business, I really also encourage you to track and communicate your progress. So talk about what you're learning, talk about it with your audience, share it on social media, all the things that you're learning and how you're taking these actions to become more sustainable and reduce your emissions. So the next step is reviewing your waste and again, setting a reduction strategy. So for example, if you still offer prints or albums, how are you delivering those to clients? Are you having everything shipped to you? Or are you having them shipped directly to clients? Are you using suppliers who use sustainable practices within their work? And are you using suppliers who are more local to your clients? That's why I'm going to plug just pick time. I don't know other galleries do this, but I love the fact for that I can set different labs depending on where my clients are, so that I don't have to worry about the distance that things are being shipped. When it comes to waste as well, looking at how often you are changing your equipment, and looking at, can you increase the life of the equipment that you use by servicing it regularly, by buying used or refurbished if you need to buy more. And then when you do get to the end of life of your equipment, can it still be used by someone, whether that's resold or just donated to someone who can then still keep using it, so that we're not creating more electronic waste. Then of course, when it comes to the environment, protecting the natural landscapes, following leave no trace, super important, and making sure that you're not only keeping yourself accountable to that, but also that you're educating others. So if you are sharing images in beautiful natural locations, making sure that you do also educate others on the impacts of being there, of the reality, not only sharing kind of the beautiful photograph, but also talking about perhaps the challenges that locations are facing, and educating your clients on how to also minimize their impact. And just in general, being mindful of the potential impacts of your images, and thinking, okay, if this place is so vulnerable that I probably shouldn't be sharing, if I'm not going to share the location, should I even be sharing the image in the first place? And maybe even just taking that even further step back and going, should I even be here in the first place? And then just making sure, especially with destinations, but even if you're just shooting in any environment, educating yourself, and again your clients or your audience on things like social media, on things like the environmental challenges and the vulnerabilities of these locations. So when you are planning a trip somewhere, instead of just looking at the best photo spots, the best places to go for the most epic images, also taking some time to research, and sometimes the best way to do this is looking at local media, local organizations, to look at what the discussions are around sustainability and environmental impact in these areas. And then potentially even then knowing when is the time to say no. Actually, now is not the time for us to go there. Where can we go that is perhaps minimizing our impact? So those are just a few things that can help you on the road to being more environmentally sustainable within your business. When it comes to the economically sustainable stuff, these are all things that are great for us as business owners. This is all just wins for us. So pricing for profit, making sure that your business is profitable. And that means resisting those urges to discount, to shoot for free, in order to get like that dream booking. So if you really want to be sustainable as a photographer, you need to be profitable in your business. And that means that you're pricing so that you're making a profit. The next thing, which also fits under being economically sustainable, even though it's maybe not talked about within this context, is having multiple revenue streams, having a diverse income. So if you were in business before the pandemic, you may have experienced the stress that comes with losing an entire income stream when you can't do that thing. So just thinking about, if you want to be working as a photographer, if you want to be self-employed and you want to do this for the foreseeable future, that you are creating income from diverse revenue streams that maybe aren't so hung up on each other, so that if you either can't shoot weddings or you have to take time out from a certain area of your business, that you are still able to support yourself and your business financially. Then when we're pricing for profit, that means we can outsource, which is amazing because it creates a job for someone else. It allows us to give back. It allows someone else to pay taxes, that thing that we all hate doing, but to support their family, their local community. And it frees up our time too, so that we can do more of the stuff that we love to do. And bonus points if you're hiring diverse people. You can as well support and promote other local businesses, so that you're really helping support your local industry, your local economy, but also maybe not always local, but if there are other sustainable businesses that you can promote through the work that you do, then that's always a great thing as well, to support the economy and making sure that it's the sustainable businesses that are ones that are growing. And a final thing that you can do when it comes to economic sustainability, and it's often overlooked, is you can change your bank. And so many people are unaware that a lot of mainstream banks are terrible for investing funding in fossil fuel companies, and sometimes even companies that support things like arms and unpleasant things happening, like wars and conflicts. So looking to see if your bank has good sustainability credentials, what they are doing with your money. And there are so many new banks coming out now. Make sure it's a regulated bank. I'm not a financial advisor, but make sure it's a regulated bank if you are changing. But there are so many new banks coming out that are focusing on sustainability, on ethical and sustainable investment. So making sure that the money that you have earned isn't then going into funding more of the climate crisis. So yeah, switch your bank. It's a super easy, relatively pain-free thing that you can do. Then finally, let's look at social and cultural sustainability. So the big part of this really is diversity, inclusion. And so making sure, I think one of the big things here is that you're educating yourself. Educate yourself on things like your unconscious biases, on the privilege that you might have as a photographer from a certain background, from a certain country, and how that affects how you operate not only in your own society and your own economy, but also when you're then traveling potentially around the world, and how there could be things like power dynamics at play when you are traveling to other countries. Then educate yourself on the issues that might impact your clients, especially if you're aiming to be a more diverse and a more inclusive business. Then it's not just about making sure that the images on your portfolio are diverse, but actually making sure that you are educated and that you understand issues, challenges that might impact your clients, and to make sure that you are actually an ally, that you are actually somebody who is there supporting, not just using them as a token to get more business. And also educate yourself on issues that might impact people in the places that you are working. Are you traveling to locations where they are suffering from things like water shortages? And what is the impact of you traveling there? Are these places that are suffering from over-tourism, from places like, for example, Barcelona, where residents are really, really unhappy about things like Airbnbs? To make sure that you understand, okay, when I go out into the world and when I go out with my clients, how can we be as socially and culturally responsible and sustainable as possible? Then when it comes to building more diversity and inclusivity into your portfolio, it's so important to put the people before the portfolio. So put your clients' needs first, especially when we're talking about things like being more diverse, like racially, LGBTQ plus couples. Just be aware of your motivation for taking these bookings. And if it's a client with a background that you're not super familiar with, from a religious background or a cultural background where you don't really have that knowledge, that experience, then it's important for you to educate yourself if you're going to work with those clients. So just to share a really quick story, because this happened to some friends of mine who are photographers, just to kind of elaborate why it's important, is to put the clients before your portfolio needs. Some friends of mine are wedding photographers. They're amazing in the UK, and they shoot a lot of Jewish weddings. They're not Jewish themselves, but they have got a huge kind of reputation within the community, and they shoot a lot of Jewish weddings. And this year they have, they're working with a new planner. And this planner took on this wedding, which was a Jewish wedding, because it was great. They hadn't done one before, but they thought it would be great for their portfolio to be able to diversify, which in itself, not a bad thing. Great, diversifying, making more people welcome, always good. However, the planner, during the planning process, there was a lot of back and forth with the couple, and the couple reached out to the photographer and said, hey, like the planner's trying to really pressure us to have a particular timeline, and we just don't feel like that works for the format of a Jewish wedding. Like there's certain things that we've always just experienced happened at certain times, and the planner's telling us we can't do it that way. And the couple were kind of feeling a little bit kind of gaslit, just a little bit uncomfortable with the whole situation. And the photographers, being really experienced in this area, they actually went to the planner and educated the planner on Jewish weddings, on the different events that happen, the order that they usually happen. But it shouldn't be up to the photographers to educate other people. So if you are, as a service provider, if you are wanting to diversify, if you're wanting to shoot more culturally diverse weddings, or whatever it is, make sure that you take the time first to educate yourself. So make sure you've taken the time to understand the cultures and traditions that are involved, so that you understand the aspects as a photographer that you're photographing, so that you understand and respect if there's maybe certain aspects of the day that should be captured, you know, if there's privacy that you need to respect, what you capture versus what you share publicly. And making sure that you're capturing things that are culturally, in a culturally sensitive way, without reinforcing potentially harmful stereotypes. And I think especially when it comes to diversifying portfolios, making sure that despite the fact that we are all artists, we like to say that we often capture things, you know, with our interpretation. When it's people from different backgrounds, making sure that you actually are not centering yourself and your experiences, and putting your interpretation on things that maybe have a different meaning for other people. So a big part of that is taking the time for you as the photographer to educate yourself, to make sure that you are not causing harm to anyone. So then, of course, with all that said, we do want to have a diverse portfolio. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure that people feel welcome. And just remembering that inclusivity, that diversity, it encompasses so many things. It encompasses race and ethnicity, gender, age diversity, diversity of religion, body shape and size, ability, but also then the intersection of all of these different things. So making sure that we understand that an LGBTQ plus couple is not just two brides in wedding dresses, that there are so many different intersections, and that we are not stereotyping and tokenizing people. And then also making sure that we're reviewing our language, that we're using non-gendered language, that we're not using stereotypical language. And one of the best ways that we can do this is surrounding ourselves with a diverse community of people, with a diverse team if you're outsourcing, with a diverse group within the community, within your industry. And that's one of the best ways to make sure to kind of gut check whether you're kind of seeing things from your own point of view, and actually bringing in the experiences, the expertise from other people from diverse backgrounds into the work that you do. So those are kind of the three main pillars. Just to give you, kind of as we're coming towards the end, some just other ideas of ways within the work that you do as a photographer, how you can incorporate more messages around sustainability. So you can consider doing something like a style shoot that is inspired by sustainability. For example, could you create an elopement or a wedding style shoot that is using thrifted, vintage or upcycled clothing. And it's using diverse models that really challenge a lot of the stereotypes that we see. And is it done with a diverse creative team as well, with different perspectives? You can create guides for your clients on more sustainable choices. Now, depending on the work that you do, that might be things like leave no trace guides, so that they understand the impacts of the particular areas that they're going to. It could be guides on where to buy pre-loved outfits, how to use the items, the things that they already have for their photo shoots. It could be guides on sustainable florists. You let your imagination run wild, but just think about kind of within the work that you do, what areas can you help also promote more sustainable choices to your clients? Then when it comes to education as well, supporting diverse educators and learning from diverse voices. This is super, super important. So attend workshops, courses and events that are run from educators from diverse backgrounds, and support events as well that prioritize sustainability. And then one of the most simple things, but it can be super effective, is just to have conversations about sustainability with other people. So tell people after today that you came to a talk about legacy and all I did was bang on about sustainability, but maybe talk about what you've learned, talk about something that you didn't know was something that you could do to be more sustainable. Share what you're learning and share your journey and bring other people with you on that. Because while change starts with us as individuals, like we need collective action to get to the transformation that we need to do the work that is kind of required. And sign up for the Photographers of People and Planet email list. I'm not going to plug it loads, but essentially I hate social media. Social media has a huge carbon footprint. And so I'm not going to be someone who's posting on social media all the time. But if you want to engage more in this topic, sign up for the email list, because that's where you'll hear about new podcast episodes with experts, with other industry professionals from all sorts of different backgrounds talking about these kind of different themes. That's where I will launch carbon literacy training and all of these things. So I'm not gonna force sustainability down anyone's throat, but if you want to be on this journey, then please do sign up for that email list. So yeah, going on then a little bit more. Okay, you're convinced, you're going to start to try and build some stuff into your work. Something that trips a lot of people up, something that people are worried about is woke washing. So what's woke washing? It's just when people use social justice rhetoric or different causes for marketing purposes without actually making meaningful changes or commitments. And so different types of woke washing include greenwashing. That's the one most people are familiar with. Rainbow washing, which we just had Pride Month. That can be another big one where you see a lot of brands coming under the spotlight, under criticism for only sort of outwardly in their marketing supporting things like Pride Month, but actually doing very little from the back end of their business to support the issues that that community is affected by. Within that, also tokenism, superficial diversity, and selective activism. So again, it's just making sure that we're not kind of saying, I'm a diverse and inclusive business because look at my portfolio, but actually the whole way that your business operates, the whole way it's set up is actually, you're only doing it to benefit you as a business and not to benefit those people and that community, those communities as a whole. So just a few kind of yes and no things when it comes to woke washing, greenwashing, things to watch out for, things that I have seen with other people, questions that can sometimes come up. So things like offsets. It's kind of now considered that offsets are essentially greenwashing. Offsets have been kind of, in a lot of research, they've said now they don't really work. We need to be doing all of this anyway if we're to reach all of our environmental goals. And the big problem with offsets is actually something called the rebound effect. So for example, somebody who offsets all of their flights from destination weddings is actually more likely to take more flights. And so there's research that shows that offsetting is actually many cases more harmful than good. So using that as your one and only sustainability criteria and then saying your business is carbon neutral isn't going to fly anymore, and consumers are becoming more aware of these things. Making sure that we are not handpicking information and images that we are sharing to make us appear more sustainable and inclusive without that actually reflecting the reality of our business. And also avoiding only prioritizing things like diversity and inclusion when it's high visibility times, such as Pride Month. So what can we do then that is not greenwashing or woke washing, that is actually positive steps that show that we are committed, that we are building this positive legacy, this more sustainable future? So lead with actions, don't lead with your goals. As we've seen from governments, businesses, it's very easy to set these sky high goals of net zero 2030, all of these, whatever, but there's no action happening. So lead with the actions and the proof. Show people what you are actively doing within your business to be more sustainable, to be more inclusive. And then avoiding vague terms. So we see these all the time: good for the planet, inclusive. What do they even mean? Like, avoid using these terms without actually being able to, again, back them up with actions, with facts that people can see. And just be honest about where you can do better and how you plan to get there. Because the fact is, we know that ethical consumerism, people want to have to work with brands that are more sustainable, that are more ethical, but they don't expect you to be perfect. What most ethical consumers want is for you to be honest. And we know, we've all heard this in marketing, that people buy from brands and people that they trust. And trust is built on things like transparency, yes, competency, how good you are, but also authenticity, fairness, openness, and vulnerability. So just remembering, you don't have to be perfect. Just be honest about where you are in your journey and how you are striving to be better. Because I just want to wrap it up and say, we are only on this planet relatively for a very short time. And so in the work that we do as photographers, like, let's just build a legacy that we can be proud of, to say that we didn't just do amazing work, but that we actually did things to create meaningful change and leave things better than we found them. So thank you. That is it from me. And I'd love to, have any questions, discussions that, you've asked during the, last hour.
Thank you so much, Kat. There's so much, there's a wealth of this information from like every corner of the web that I feel like all takes different biases and sides, and this felt really neutral and just so resourceful in one spot. As Kat mentioned, there's a bunch of resources that we'll be sending out afterwards. But I've got a few questions from the chat. There actually weren't too many, which is great. You were really, really informative. So first one, early in the chat from Sky. In regards to influence, how do you handle the risk between influence versus taking another step into advocacy and the impact it might have on how we, as photographers are viewed individually and as the result on the business? I believe they can coexist, but what is the balance found?
That's a hard question. I think it's, I guess for me, if I go with maybe like the social media influence part of it as just one thing, because I think our influence is so broad, of just kind of bringing that thing back to, for example, like every time I post something, thinking about, okay, what are the potential influences, what are the potential consequences of this, and how can I present it? So how can I present this image? How can I present this story in a way that if it's going to influence people, it's going to not necessarily, I hope have a positive influence, but sometimes it's even for me more just about honesty. Because I see that especially a lot in the work that I do, because I shoot in a location that lots of people want to. I know that I have an influence to say for example, okay, this is the location. I'm going to show you the Instagram shot. Now I'm going to show you the behind the scenes. So for me, like that's a way to use like my influence to make sure that, yes, okay, I'm showing the images that everyone's expecting to see, but at the same time, within the same carousel and within the description and with the like accompanying blog post, that I'm also painting these pictures of like the reality of the potential impact of the choices that those clients could make if they want to do something similar. So if that answers that question, it feels like it's a very deep and philosophical question.
I do think it answers the question of coexisting. From Mike, you mentioned being mindful on what you share, like the morning of photos with the bridesmaids. Do you remove tags on socials if you get tagged in those kinds of images? I.e., are you curating the content you're being tagged in publicly that was delivered to a client?
For me, I don't shoot a whole lot of like detail stuff like that, so it's not so relevant. I've never thought about removing tag. I have removed tags on stuff where I've been tagged in where I'm like, not sure. It's more for me on that I can't influence what a client shares and what they share with their circle of influence. And yes, there are things that I will document, like getting ready stuff with all their personalized little things that I inside am crying going, I wish you hadn't done that because you're probably never going to wear it again. But I know that I'm being paid for a job. And at that point, it's not about my values. It's not about my beliefs. So I will shoot those images. I will give those images to the clients. I won't share them. Tend to also then, if I'm blogging an image, not share them. And if they tag me in them, again, those, for me personally, that doesn't happen. I think that's for you as a photographer to kind of think, is that going to be the main influence? If they're tagging me, I guess you have the thing that you've been tagged on, say, social media. I don't know if anyone ever looks at that. I always forget that existed until like that just got brought up. So for me personally, I wouldn't maybe worry too much about that. But if you feel like, okay, this is actually something where, yeah, do you know what? Now I'm aware of this and I'm noticing it more. How can I preempt this happening in the first place, that clients are actually maybe not buying these things in the first place? How could I educate my clients before this even happens to say, hey, look, you can have beautiful getting ready shots or beautiful gifts to give to like your bridal party or whatever that can still be meaningful, that can be things that, and again, I think the image that I shared with the hip flask, you'd think that is something sustainable, that is something that somebody could use again. However, it just turned out that person, didn't want it. So yeah, I think everybody will have a different kind of level of how they feel on this, but if you untag yourself personally, I wouldn't. And then just thinking about going forward, how you potentially steer clients into making different decisions in the first place before it comes to those.
I think that flows really amazingly into the follow-up question from Mike as well. Do you have this kind of content on your website, but how direct to client info are you in the lead up to booking a client or the lead up to their day? Do you aim to educate your own clientele too? I believe you answered that a little bit already, but is that a helpful option in these kinds of goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of my workflow as a photographer, I have a leave no trace guide that they get. That was a template that I got from taking the leave no trace course, that I have adjusted, amended specifically because I only work in my home region, and I can tailor that to like my own specific challenges in this home region. But I also have like a ton of blog content. I love blogging. And so I have a ton of like resources on my own website that are done as client guides that people who aren't my clients can still read them. But I have amazing workflow set up that just triggers emails that go out every kind of 2-3 weeks to clients on the lead up to their wedding to say kind of, have you thought about this? Here's an article to read about where you can buy, for example, where you can buy your wedding outfits, some of the best places for pre-loved. how to consider sustainability, how you can consider your carbon footprint of your elopement, and choices that you may or may not want to make. So I drip feed those to my clients. They're there on my website for everybody to see, but I then also drip feed those to my clients in the whole planning process leading up to their day as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Just even hearing from my end that years ago I made a really focused point to have client education as one of my business goals. And with that meant sending a lot of guides out or things that had tips about cleaning the wedding day or cleaning the wedding space before I got there, and how to book an appropriate engagement session and so on. And so it would be so easy to filter in this same kind of information within a workflow that should already exist with your clientele. It makes tons of sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we've got, unless there's anything else that comes through, I've got one last question from Kat. Just being curious about the offsetting part, would you still advise against offsetting if you combine it with other ways to support the planet?
No. So there's, I cut it out of the slides here for this because it was just getting too long. But there's a discussion between, offsetting and carbon neutral or climate neutral versus net zero. And there's a lot of discussions around these at the moment. And the problem with offsets is a lot of people will only offset, and then they will say, we're carbon neutral because we offset, but they're actually doing zero. They're just throwing money at the problem without actually making any meaningful changes. And so the kind of the better one to look for, the one that is something that is, in my opinion, better to aim for, is what is known as net zero. And net zero is you have to reduce by 90%, and then you've got 10% that you're allowed to keep of emissions that you're like, I can't, whatever I do, I can't reduce those. Then yes, offsetting, perfect, do it. Research what you're doing for offsets, because there's also a lot of issues around things like offsets that are compromising Indigenous people's rights in certain countries where there are offset projects. So research into the offsets that you are buying. But I would say first, reduce as much as you can. And then, if it's not the goal for net zero, which is 90% reduction, just as much as you can. And then offsets should be really a last resort.
Amazing. I don't have any more questions. So thank you, Kat, so much. Thank you so much for your time. Today was really incredible. This is such a great piece of information. To anyone that's still listening, sometime this week, by the end of this week, we'll have some resources that are sent out from what Kat spoke about, as well as a recording of this. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Yeah.